Have you ever had that moment where the floor seems to drop out from beneath you? That sickening freefall when you realize the people who were supposed to protect you have betrayed you instead? I certainly have. My name is Rebecca Turner, and 5 years ago, my parents took the $42,000 they'd saved for my college education, money they'd promised me since I was old enough to understand what college was, and spent it on my sister Vanessa's extravagant wedding to a man she'd known for less than a year. What happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for my entire family. Because when they came crawling back 5 years later, desperate for financial help, they weren't prepared for what they found, or the tears that would follow when they saw the empire I'd built without them. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I remember exactly where I was standing when my world collapsed. The kitchen of our suburban Minneapolis home, morning light streaming through the windows, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air. I was still in my pajamas, having just stumbled downstairs for coffee before my early shift at the local diner. My bare feet stuck slightly to the linoleum floor as I reached for the pile of mail on the counter. And there it was, my acceptance letter from Northwestern University, the school I'd been dreaming about since junior high, the program that could launch me into the career in biomedical engineering I'd been working toward for years. I'd gotten a partial merit scholarship, but it wouldn't cover everything. That's where the college fund came in, the one my parents had been contributing to since I was born. The one they'd shown me statements for every year on my birthday, watching it grow alongside me. "Mom! Dad!" I called out, excitement bubbling through me like champagne. I heard footsteps on the stairs and my parents appeared, already dressed, for the day. My mother in her nurse's scrubs, my father buttoning his dress shirt for another day at the insurance office. "What is it, honey?" my mom asked, her eyes immediately going to the letter in my hand. "Is that—" "I got in," I exclaimed, holding the acceptance letter high. "Northwestern, the bioengineering program." Their smiles seemed to freeze, not quite reaching their eyes. There was an uncomfortable pause, one that stretched just a beat too long. "That's wonderful, Rebecca," my father said finally, his voice oddly flat. "But maybe we should talk about some of the state schools as well. The U of M has an excellent program too." I lowered the letter slowly, confusion creeping in. "But we've been planning for Northwestern for years. You know, their program is exactly what I want. And we have the college fund." Another strange pause. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. My mother sighed and sat down at the kitchen table, gesturing for me to join her. "Sweetie, about the college fund," she began, her voice taking on that careful tone adults use when they're about to tell you something they know will hurt. "There's been a change of plans." My stomach twisted as I sank into the chair across from her. "What kind of change?" My father cleared his throat, standing behind my mother with his hand on her shoulder. "We've had to reallocate those funds for Vanessa's wedding." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, the just kidding, the explanation that would make this make sense. It never came. "Vanessa's wedding," I repeated dully. "You spent my college fund on Vanessa's wedding." My sister was 24, 6 years older than me, and had been dating Trevor for exactly 10 months. He'd proposed 3 months ago with a diamond ring that cost more than he could afford on his entry-level marketing salary. Vanessa had immediately started planning the wedding of her dreams, an affair at the lakeside gardens that seemed to grow more elaborate with each passing week. "It's not like that," my mother protested weakly. "We're helping both of you. But Vanessa needs this now, and you can take out student loans like most kids do. You've always been so responsible with money. We know you'll handle it well." "Handle it well?" I echoed, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. You're punishing me for being responsible? For not demanding designer clothes or spring break trips to Cancun like Vanessa always did? We're not punishing you, my father said, his tone hardening. We're making a decision as a family. Vanessa found her person. This is one day she'll remember forever. And my education? I asked. The future I've been working toward since I was 14, taking advanced classes, volunteering at the hospital, working weekends and summers to build my resume? My mother reached across the table for my hand. I pulled it back. You'll still go to college, sweetie, just maybe not Northwestern. The community college has transfer programs, or the state school like your dad mentioned. The rest of her words faded into a dull roar as realization washed over me. This wasn't new. This was just the latest, and by far the most devastating, in a pattern that had defined my entire life. Vanessa had always come first. When we were kids, and there was only enough money for one of us to take dance lessons, Vanessa got them because she showed more natural talent. When I made honor roll every semester of high school while Vanessa barely graduated, my achievements were expected, while hers were celebrated with a weekend trip to Chicago. I'd spent my life believing that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved myself enough, eventually my parents would see me. Really see me. But sitting there in our kitchen, watching them justify stealing my future to fund my sister's one-day party, I finally understood the truth. They would never see me as anything more than the reliable one. The one who would bend so Vanessa wouldn't have to. The one who could be counted on to figure it out, while Vanessa needed everything handed to her. I stood up slowly, my acceptance letter clutched in my hand. How much is left? I asked quietly. My parents exchanged another look. Nothing, my father admitted. The venue deposit was the last of it, but we can help you fill out financial aid forms. I cut him off with a raised hand. I couldn't bear to hear any more. I walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, and into my bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't scream. Those reactions would have given them an excuse to dismiss me as melodramatic, just as they always dismissed my feelings when they conflicted with what Vanessa wanted. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began researching student loans. If I was going to Northwestern, and I was definitely going to Northwestern, I would need to figure out how to pay for it myself. Every penny. As I worked, Vanessa burst into my room without knocking, her eyes bright with excitement. Did you hear? Mom and Dad are covering the full cost of the Lakeside Gardens. We can have the string quartet for the ceremony and the 10-piece band for the reception. I looked up at my sister, my beautiful, carefree sister who had never once had to consider the cost of anything she wanted, and felt something inside me shift. Not anger, exactly. Something colder and more permanent. Congratulations, I said, flatly. She frowned, finally noticing the letter on my desk. Oh, you got into Northwestern? That's great, Becca. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But honestly, the loans are probably a blessing in disguise. It'll teach you fiscal responsibility. Coming from someone who had maxed out 3 credit cards by age 22, cards our parents had paid off, the irony was almost too much to bear. I just stared at her until her smile faltered slightly. Anyway, she continued, backing toward the door, don't forget we have your bridesmaid dress fitting tomorrow. The deposit was non-refundable, so you can't back out now. After she left, I sat perfectly still for several minutes, breathing through the tightness in my chest. Then I opened a new document on my computer and began to make a plan. Step 1. Accept Northwestern's offer and apply for every scholarship and grant I could find, no matter how small. Step 2. Take the maximum federal student loans available. Step 3. Find a job near campus that would work around my class schedule. Step 4. Graduate with honors and get a job that would allow me to pay off those loans as quickly as possible. Step 5. Never ever count on my parents for anything again. In the weeks that followed, I went through the motions. I attended Vanessa's dress fittings and nodded at her endless discussions about flower arrangements and menu selections. I listened to my parents talk about which relatives were coming from out of town and how they'd need to convert my bedroom into guest space for the week of the wedding. "You don't mind sleeping on the couch that week, do you, Becca?" my mother asked, not really a question. "Your Aunt Linda's back can't handle it." I just nodded, already mentally checked out of the conversation. I had been accepted to 3 summer research programs that would provide room and board. I wouldn't be sleeping on any couch. I wouldn't be in that house at all. The day of Vanessa's wedding arrived. A perfect June Saturday with blue skies and just enough breeze to make the temperature comfortable. I stood beside her in the bridal suite, wearing the lavender bridesmaid dress that had cost me 2 weeks' salary from my diner job. Another expense my parents had decided I should cover myself while they paid for Vanessa's gown that cost as much as a used car. "You look beautiful," I told my sister, and it was true. With her dark hair swept up and secured with pearl pins, her makeup professionally applied to highlight her big brown eyes, the same eyes we both inherited from our mother. She was radiant. "Do you think Trevor will cry when he sees me?" she asked, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her satin skirt. "Definitely," I assured her, pinning a loose curl back into place. Despite everything, I did love my sister. It wasn't her fault our parents had created this dynamic between us. Or maybe it was partly her fault for leaning into it so completely, never once considering that her gains often came at my expense. But today wasn't the day to untangle that knot. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception was extravagant. The band played while couples twirled across the dance floor. The champagne flowed. The photographer captured every moment. My parents beamed with pride as they watched Vanessa and Trevor share their first dance. No one noticed when I slipped away early, changing out of my bridesmaid dress and into jeans and a t-shirt in the venue's bathroom. No one noticed when I called a Lyft to take me home. No one noticed when I finished packing the last of my things. For the summer research program, I was leaving for the next morning. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I caught sight of the framed family photo on my nightstand. The 4 of us at Vanessa's high school graduation, all smiles as she held her diploma. I picked it up, studying our faces. Even then, at what was supposed to be a celebration of her achievement, I could see it in my expression. The hope that one day, they would celebrate me that way too. I placed the photo face down in the drawer and closed it. The next morning, I left before anyone else was awake, catching an early Lyft to the airport. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to the Stanford Summer Research Program. Cell. Reception might be spotty. Don't worry about me. Congratulations again to Vanessa and Trevor. Rebecca." I turned off my phone during the flight and didn't turn it back on for 3 days. When I finally did, there were a few texts from my mother, asking for details about when I'd be home and reminding me that we needed to figure out this Northwestern situation. I responded with a brief message. Staying with the program through August, already figured out Northwestern. Starting in September, all handled. What I didn't tell them was how I'd handled it, how I'd taken out the maximum federal loans, how I'd applied for and received a work-study position in one of the research labs, how I'd found a tiny apartment to share with 3 other students that was barely bigger than our living room at home, but was what I could afford. I didn't tell them because it wasn't their business anymore. They had made their choice, and now I was making mine. When I arrived at Northwestern that fall, I hit the ground running. While other freshmen were decorating their dorm rooms and attending welcome parties, I was meeting with financial aid advisors and setting up my work schedule. During orientation week, I introduced myself to professors in my department, asking about research opportunities and making it clear I was willing to put in extra hours. My roommates thought I was intense. Maybe I was. But every time I felt tired or discouraged, every time I was tempted to skip a study session or turn down an extra shift, I remembered that moment in our kitchen when my parents told me my future was less important than Vanessa's one-day celebration. That memory was like fuel, propelling me forward when exhaustion threatened to pull me under. By the end of my first semester, I had secured a position as a research assistant in Dr. Carter's bioengineering lab, a rare opportunity for a freshman. By the end of my first year, I had maintained a perfect GPA while working 20 hours a week and volunteering at the university hospital. My parents called occasionally, our conversations brief and superficial. They seemed to believe this was just a phase, that I would eventually get over what they had done, and things would go back to normal. They didn't understand that normal was precisely what I was escaping from. Vanessa's marriage to Trevor lasted exactly 14 months. He left her for his administrative assistant, a cliché she found both devastating and humiliating. She moved back home, bringing with her designer clothes and wedding china, but no job and no savings. My parents converted my bedroom, which had briefly been a guest room, into a temporary space for her to get back on her feet. I learned all this through terse phone calls and the occasional social media update I allowed myself to check. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving that year, or Christmas. I stayed on campus, picking up extra hours in the lab when most students were away. Dr. Carter noticed. "You work harder than any undergraduate I've ever had," she told me one evening as we were calibrating equipment for an experiment. "But you need to be careful about burnout." I shrugged, adjusting the microscope. "I'm fine." "Are you?" she asked, pulling up a stool beside me. Because brilliance needs rest and connection to sustain itself. Even the sharpest minds need balance. Something about her genuine concern cracked the veneer I'd carefully maintained. Before I could stop myself, I told her everything: the college fund, the wedding, the loans, the severed relationship with my parents. She listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "So you're proving them wrong, showing them you don't need them." "I'm not," I began, then stopped. Was that what I was doing? "I'm just trying to build a future for myself," I said finally. "A worthy goal," Dr. Carter agreed. "But be careful that your determination to succeed without them doesn't become the center of your identity. That gives them a power they don't deserve." Her words stayed with me, needling at something I wasn't ready to examine too closely. Was I defining myself in opposition to my parents' betrayal? Was everything I did still in some way about them? The question followed me through my sophomore year, a year that brought both challenges and unexpected opportunities. The most significant came in the form of a research breakthrough in Dr. Carter's lab, a new approach to synthetic tissue development that I had helped pioneer. Our paper was published in a prestigious journal, my name listed second among the authors, an almost unheard-of achievement for an undergraduate. The publication led to an interview with a science podcast, which led to attention from a biomedical startup called NextGen Therapeutics. They approached me with an offer that seemed too good to be true: a part-time position developing their tissue engineering protocols with flexible hours to accommodate my classes, and a salary that would significantly reduce my reliance on student loans. I accepted immediately. Working at NextGen transformed my financial situation. For the first time since arriving at Northwestern, I wasn't constantly calculating how each dollar spent would affect my ability to pay rent or buy textbooks. I opened a savings account. I started making small investments in companies I researched carefully. I began paying down the interest on my student loans while still in school, something most of my classmates couldn't imagine doing. But the most valuable aspect of the job wasn't the money. It was seeing firsthand how scientific research became marketable innovation, how ideas born in university labs could transform into products that helped real patients. I absorbed everything, asking questions and volunteering for projects beyond my official responsibilities. By the beginning of junior year, I had moved into a small studio apartment by myself, a luxury I never thought I'd be able to afford as an undergrad. I had 3 publications to my name. I had professional connections in the biotech industry, and I had the beginnings of an idea, a concept for improving prosthetic interfaces with biological tissue that had come to me during a late-night study session. On a whim, I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Carter to discuss it. "This has commercial potential," she said after reviewing my initial designs. "Significant potential, actually. Have you considered applying for a provisional patent?" I hadn't. The idea of patenting my concept, of potentially founding a company around it someday, seemed like something people did after graduating, not during their junior year of college. But with Dr. Carter's encouragement, I began the process. I documented my research meticulously. I consulted with the university's technology transfer office. I met with intellectual property lawyers who took me seriously despite my age, recognizing the innovation in my approach. What had started as a side project was quickly becoming the focus of my professional ambitions. Meanwhile, life at home continued without me. Through sporadic texts from my mother, I learned that Vanessa had finally found a job as an administrative assistant at a local marketing firm, that my parents had dipped into their retirement savings to help her buy a car after hers broke down, that they were still supporting her, still making sacrifices to smooth her path while I built mine stone by stone. The contrast didn't bring me satisfaction. It just reinforced what I'd already learned. The patterns in my family were too deeply entrenched to change. The only thing I could change was my participation in them. And then, 3 years after they spent my college fund on Vanessa's failed marriage, the call came that would bring everything full circle. The winter of my junior year was the coldest I could remember. Minneapolis natives might disagree, but Chicago's wind cut through layers of clothing and sliced right to the bone. My tiny studio apartment had drafty windows that rattled with each gust, and the heating system was temperamental at best. But it was mine, paid for with money I had earned, and that made the cold somehow more bearable. I had settled into a rhythm at Northwestern. Classes, lab work, my part-time position at NextGen, and the growing patent application for my prosthetic interface concept. Each piece of my life carefully arranged like components on a circuit board, functional and purposeful. What I lacked in family connection, I made up for in professional momentum. Dr. Carter had become more than just a research advisor. She was the mentor I desperately needed, someone who saw my potential without strings attached. She invited me to her home for Thanksgiving that 3rd year, an unexpected gesture that caught me off guard. "I can't," I said automatically when she extended the invitation. "I have to work on the biomaterial degradation tests." "The tests can wait," she replied firmly. "Rebecca, when was the last time you celebrated a holiday or took a day off?" I couldn't remember. Days off felt like wasted time, opportunities slipping through my fingers. But something in her expression, genuine concern mixed with a steely resolve I'd come to recognize, told me this wasn't really a request. Her home was warm and cluttered with books, exactly as I'd imagined. Her husband, Alan, was a chemistry professor with a dry wit and an impressive collection of vintage sci-fi novels. Their 2 teenage sons were refreshingly normal, more interested in video games than academic achievement. It was strange to be in a family environment where no one was trying to prove anything or compete for attention. "So you're the famous Rebecca," Alan said as he carved the turkey. "Sylvia says you're revolutionizing prosthetic interfaces." I felt my face flush. It's just a concept at this stage. A concept that 3 biotech firms have already expressed interest in, Dr. Carter added, passing me a bowl of mashed potatoes. "Don't downplay your achievements, Rebecca. It's a brilliant innovation." The conversation flowed easily from there. Discussions about recent scientific breakthroughs, debates about the ethics of genetic modifications, stories from Alan's undergraduate days. Not once did anyone ask me about my family or why I wasn't with them for the holiday. Not once did I feel like I needed to justify my presence. It was a revelation. This is what family dinner could be. Intellectual engagement without judgment. Support without strings. Belonging without erasure of self. As I helped clear dishes afterward, Dr. Carter handed me a glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "You haven't mentioned your parents in months," she observed. "Have you spoken to them recently?" I shook my head. "Just the obligatory birthday call. My mother wanted to know if I'd be home for Christmas." I scrubbed a stubborn bit of cranberry sauce from a plate. I told her I couldn't get away from the lab. "And is that true?" I met her gaze. "No, but it's easier than explaining why I don't want to be there." She nodded slowly. "Running a successful experiment requires both action and observation," she said, falling into the scientific metaphors we both found comfort in. "You've been in the action phase with your family situation, creating distance, building your own life. Maybe it's time for some observation. See what's changed. Collect data." "What if nothing has changed?" I asked, voicing the fear that kept me from reaching out. "What if they still see me as the reliable afterthought they can take from whenever Vanessa needs something?" "Then you'll have confirmed your hypothesis and can proceed accordingly," she said simply. "But science is full of surprises. Sometimes the results aren't what we expect." I considered her words carefully as I scrubbed another plate. "I'll think about it," I promised, though I had no intention of going home for Christmas. 2 days later, an email arrived from Northwestern's Technology Transfer Office. The provisional patent for my prosthetic interface design had been approved. Furthermore, a medical device company called Biomatrix Solutions wanted to discuss licensing possibilities. They were offering an initial meeting with their R&D team in January. I forwarded the email to Dr. Carter with a single line. "I think I need a better outfit for this meeting." Her reply came within minutes. "Meet me at Nordstrom tomorrow at 4, no arguments." The outfit we selected, a charcoal gray suit with a subtle blue blouse, cost more than I would typically spend on clothes for an entire year. But as Dr. Carter pointed out, it was an investment in my future. "Sometimes how you present your ideas matters almost as much as the ideas themselves," she said as I reluctantly handed over my credit card. The meeting with Biomatrix went better than I could have anticipated. Their research team was genuinely excited about the potential applications of my interface design, particularly for upper limb prosthetics. By the end of the 3-hour discussion, they were offering to fund additional development in exchange for first rights to the technology. "We'd want you involved, of course," said Dr. Lin, their head of research. "Your insight is invaluable to this project." "I'm still a student," I reminded him. "I have a year and a half left in my program." "We're aware," he replied with a smile. "We're prepared to work around your academic schedule. This could be structured as an enhanced internship with significant compensation and academic credit. We've done similar arrangements with MIT and Stanford." As he outlined the terms, a development stipend, equity in any resulting products, ongoing royalties, I struggled to maintain my professional composure. The figures he mentioned would not only eliminate my remaining student debt, but would provide a financial cushion I had never imagined possible at 20. I didn't accept, on the spot. Dr. Carter had coached me on negotiation tactics, emphasizing the importance of reviewing any offer with legal counsel. But as I left the Biomatrix offices that afternoon, stepping out into the bitter January cold, I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the building's heating system. I had done this. Me. Rebecca Turner, the afterthought, daughter. The reliable one whose future could be sacrificed for her sister's wedding. I had created something valuable entirely on my own. The licensing agreement with Biomatrix was finalized in March. The terms were even better than their initial offer, thanks to the university's experienced legal team who negotiated on my behalf. The first payment, a development advance against future royalties, arrived in my bank account a week later. I stared at the balance for a long time, not quite believing the number of zeros. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. More than enough to pay off my student loans. More than enough to secure housing through graduate school, which I was now certain I would pursue. I transferred a portion immediately to a separate account earmarked for loan repayment. Another portion went into investments Dr. Carter had helped me research. The rest I kept liquid, unsure yet what I wanted to do with it. That night, I dreamed about my parents' kitchen, about the moment they told me my college fund was gone. In the dream, I pulled out my phone and showed them my bank balance. "I don't need your money anymore," I told them. "I never will again." I woke up unsettled. Even in my dreams, I was still defining myself in opposition to them, still seeking some form of vindication. Dr. Carter's warning echoed in my mind. Be careful that your determination to succeed without them doesn't become the center of your identity. The following weekend, I did something impulsive. I booked a flight to Minneapolis. Not to see my parents, I wasn't ready for that, but to meet with a real estate agent. The idea had formed gradually, investing some of my licensing, money in property near the University of Minnesota, creating passive income through student rentals while building equity. It was a practical decision, I told myself. A smart investment strategy. It had nothing to do with establishing a presence in my hometown, with creating a tangible symbol of my success that might eventually come to my parents' attention. The real estate agent showed me several properties near campus. Most were in poor condition, typical student housing that had suffered years of neglect. But one, a small fourplex that had been recently renovated after a fire, caught my attention. The price was reasonable due to the owner's eagerness to sell after dealing with insurance claims. The location was ideal. The numbers made sense. I made an offer the same day, using a portion of my biomatrix payment as a down payment. The process moved quickly, and by the end of spring semester, I had become a property owner at 21. I hired a management company to handle day-to-day operations, but I understood the basics. The building would generate income while also appreciating in value. It felt strange to own a piece of Minneapolis while feeling so disconnected from it, emotionally. During the closing, I had deliberately scheduled my visits to avoid any chance encounters with family. I didn't want to explain what I was doing or where the money had come from. Not yet. As my junior year came to a close, another opportunity presented itself. Next-Gen Therapeutics, where I had been working part-time, was spinning off a new division focused on regenerative medicine applications, exactly the field where my research interests lay. The director, Dr. Ramirez, called me into his office one afternoon in late April. "We're establishing a research fellowship for the new division," he explained. "Full funding for graduate studies plus a significant stipend, in exchange for a commitment to work with us after completion. We'd like to offer you one of the positions." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "I haven't even applied to graduate programs yet." He waved this detail away. "We have partnerships with Northwestern, Johns Hopkins, and UCSF. Any of those would be acceptable for the fellowship. The point is, we want you on our team long-term, Rebecca. We've all seen what you're capable of." The fellowship would cover all expenses for a PhD program, plus provide a living stipend generous enough that I could focus entirely on my studies and research. In return, I would commit to working with NextGen's regenerative medicine division for at least 3 years after graduation. "Take some time to think about it," Dr. Ramirez said. "Talk to Dr. Carter. Consider which program would best align with your research interests." I nodded, trying to process what was happening. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'll get back to you soon." As I walked back to my apartment that evening, the spring air unusually mild for Chicago, I felt a curious lightness. The path ahead was opening up in ways I couldn't have imagined when I first arrived at Northwestern, determined but terrified, carrying the weight of betrayal and massive student loans. In just 3 years, I had transformed my circumstances completely. I had created intellectual property valuable enough to secure my financial future. I had purchased real estate that would provide passive income for years to come. I had earned the respect of professors and industry professionals who were now opening doors for my academic and professional advancement, all without a penny from the college fund that had been promised to me. I called Dr. Carter that evening to discuss the fellowship offer. She was enthusiastic, but cautious. "It's an incredible opportunity," she agreed. "But make sure you understand exactly what you're committing to. 3 years is significant, especially if your research takes you in directions that don't align with NextGen's priorities." We talked through the pros and cons, the potential restrictions, the alternative paths. By the end of the conversation, I had decided to accept the fellowship, but negotiate for more flexibility in the post-graduation commitment. "I'm proud of you, Rebecca," Dr. Carter said before we hung up. "Not just for these accomplishments, but for how you've handled adversity. That resilience will serve you well in research. Science is mostly failure, you know. It's persistence through failure that leads to breakthrough." Her words stayed with me as I prepared for final exams, as I negotiated terms with NextGen, as I began researching doctoral programs that would best position me for the future I was building. Persistence through failure. Wasn't that exactly what I had been practicing since that morning in my parents' kitchen? The summer between junior and senior year, I didn't take classes for the first time since starting college. Instead, I accepted a temporary position at Biomatrix's research headquarters in Boston, working directly with their prosthetics team to refine my interface design. The change of scenery was refreshing. A new city, new colleagues, new challenges that had nothing to do with my past. In Boston, no one knew me as the girl whose parents had betrayed her. I was simply Rebecca Turner, the promising young biomedical engineer with innovative ideas about tissue integration. My worth wasn't defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I was creating. I rented a small apartment in Cambridge, walking distance from the Biomatrix labs. After work, I explored the city, the winding historic streets, the museums, the waterfront parks. For the first time in years, I allowed myself leisure time without guilt. I bought books that weren't textbooks and read them in cafes. I attended concerts in public parks. I made casual friendships with other research interns, going out for occasional dinners or drinks without constantly checking the time. It was during one of these dinners that I received a text from my mother, the first direct communication in months. The others in my group were laughing about something I had missed, engaged in their own conversations while I stared at my phone. "Vanessa is engaged again. Wedding next summer. Hope you can be there this time. Love, Mom." I felt a curious detachment as I read the message. No mention of how I was doing, what I was working on, why I hadn't been home in over a year. Just another announcement about Vanessa, another assumption that I would show up and play my designated role. One of my dinner companions noticed my expression. "Bad news?" he asked. I shook my head, putting my phone away. "No, just family stuff. Nothing important." And it wasn't important, I realized. Not anymore. Whatever choices my parents and sister made, whether Vanessa got married 10 more times or never again, had no bearing on my life now. I had moved beyond their orbit, established my own gravitational pull. I didn't respond to the text. When I returned to Northwestern for my senior year, everything felt different. The campus that had once seemed overwhelmingly large now felt familiar and somewhat limited. Professors who had intimidated me as a freshman now treated me as a colleague. Classmates who had once seemed so sophisticated and prepared now appeared young and uncertain about their futures. I moved through my final year with confidence, balancing coursework with my ongoing work for Biomatrix and preparations for graduate school. I had been accepted to Northwestern's Biomedical Engineering PhD program with full funding through the NextGen Fellowship, allowing me to continue the research relationships I had built while advancing my education. My financial situation continued to improve as well. The fourplex in Minneapolis was fully rented and generating steady income. The provisional patent had been converted to a full patent, and the royalty payments from Biomatrix were arriving quarterly. I had paid off all my student loans, every penny of the debt I had been forced to take on when my college fund vanished, and was building substantial savings. In February of my senior year, I received another unexpected call from Dr. Lin at Biomatrix. "We're preparing a presentation for the National Medical Devices Conference in May," he explained. "Your interface design will be featured prominently. We'd like you to attend as part of our team." The conference was in San Diego, coinciding perfectly with the week after graduation. I accepted immediately, flattered by the invitation and excited to see my work showcased on a national stage. "There's one more thing," Dr. Lin added. "Several journalists will be covering the conference, including a team from Biotech Innovations magazine. They're particularly interested in young researchers developing breakthrough technologies. Would you be comfortable speaking with them about your work? Would I be comfortable having my professional achievements featured in one of the leading industry publications?" The question seemed absurd. "Of course," I said. "I'd be happy to discuss the research." What I didn't anticipate was that the magazine would want more than just technical details. The journalist who contacted me, Madeline Chen, was writing a feature on the next generation of biomedical innovators, focusing on the personal stories behind the scientific breakthroughs. "Readers connect with the human element," she explained during our preliminary phone call. "What inspired you to pursue this particular problem? What obstacles did you overcome? We want to showcase not just the technology, but the mind behind it." I hesitated, unsure how much of my personal story I wanted to share with a national audience. "How do you explain that your breakthrough innovation was fueled partly by determination to prove your parents wrong for betraying you?" "I'll think about how much personal background to include," I told her. "The science is really what matters." "Of course," she agreed. "But don't underestimate the power of your journey. It could inspire others facing similar challenges." As graduation approached, I found myself reflecting more on that journey. On the frightened, angry 18-year-old who had arrived at Northwestern, determined to succeed despite having every financial support pulled out from under her. On the gradual transformation from that desperate beginning to my current position, debt-free, professionally respected, financially secure, with a bright future unfolding before me. Dr. Carter's words from years earlier echoed again. Science is mostly failure. It's persistence through failure that leads to breakthrough. Perhaps my personal story wasn't just about betrayal and determination. Perhaps it was about the breakthrough that comes from persisting through circumstances that feel like failure, but aren't the end of the story. The week before graduation, I made another impulsive decision. I scheduled a flight to Minneapolis for the day after the ceremony. It was time to close the loop, to see my parents not from a place of anger or need, but from the solid foundation I had built for myself. I didn't tell them I was coming. I wasn't sure what I would say when I saw them, but I knew I needed to look them in the eyes, to stand before them as the woman I had become, rather than the daughter they had dismissed. On graduation day, Chicago weather was perfect. Clear blue skies and temperatures mild enough for the outdoor ceremony. I sat among my fellow graduates, listening to speeches about future potential and the responsibility that comes with education. When my name was called, I walked across the stage with my head high, accepting my diploma, the tangible symbol of what I had achieved against the odds. Dr. Carter found me afterward, giving me a fierce hug before introducing me to her family. "This one," she told them with undisguised pride, "is going to change the world of prosthetics. Mark my words." I blushed, but didn't contradict her. I had long since learned to stop downplaying my achievements, to accept recognition when it was genuinely earned. Later, alone in my apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes, I would be moving to a larger place for graduate school. I allowed myself a moment of pure celebration. I had done it, graduated with highest honors, secured funding for graduate studies, established financial independence, and created intellectual property that was already improving lives, all without the support that had been promised and then taken away. Tomorrow, I would fly to Minneapolis, facing whatever awaited me there. But tonight belonged to pride in how far I had come on my own terms. Whatever happened next, whether my parents recognized what they had done or continued to justify their choices, I knew my worth now, and it had nothing to do with what anyone else believed about me. As I fell asleep that night, I realized something important. I was no longer defined by what I had lost. I was defined by what I had built from its absence. The Minneapolis airport hadn't changed in the years since I'd last visited. Still the same beige tiles, the same Minnesota-themed gift shops selling toy loons and wild rice. But I had changed. As I walked through the terminal, pulling my small carry-on suitcase, I caught glimpses of my reflection in the windows. Confident posture, tailored blazer, hair styled with purpose rather than afterthought. I looked like someone with direction, someone with value. I hadn't told my parents I was coming. The last communication had been that text about Vanessa's second engagement, which I'd left unanswered. Now, standing in the bright June sunlight, outside the terminal, I hesitated before ordering a rideshare. Did I really want to show up at their doorstep unannounced? Was I ready for whatever reaction might follow? My phone buzzed with a notification. The Biotech Innovations magazine article featuring my work had just been published online, ahead of the print edition. Curious, I opened the link, scanning the headline. The Next Generation. Meet 5 young innovators, transforming biomedical technology. My section was halfway down the page, under a header that made me blink twice. Rebecca Turner, from personal setback to medical breakthrough. There was a professional photo of me in the biomatrix lab, looking intensely at a prototype of my prosthetic interface. I began reading the profile with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. When Rebecca Turner was 18, her parents made a decision that could have derailed her future. They repurposed her college fund for her sister's wedding, leaving Turner to finance her Northwestern University education entirely on her own. It was devastating, Turner acknowledges. But looking back, it created a determination in me that might not have existed otherwise. I knew that if I was going to succeed, it would be entirely on my own merit. And succeed she has. At just 22, Turner has already secured a patent for a revolutionary prosthetic interface design that allows for unprecedented integration between artificial limbs and human tissue. The technology, currently being developed in partnership with Biomatrix Solutions, has the potential to dramatically improve mobility and sensation for prosthetic users worldwide. What makes Rebecca's work exceptional is its interdisciplinary approach, says Dr. Lin, head of research at Biomatrix. She's not just thinking about the engineering challenges, but about the human experience, how to create prosthetics that feel like a natural extension of the body rather than an attached device. This fall, Turner will begin doctoral studies at Northwestern with full funding from NextGen Therapeutics, where she's already accepted a fellowship position. All this while managing a successful real estate investment and maintaining a perfect GPA. I stopped reading, my heart racing. I hadn't expected Madeline Chen to include the detail about my parents and the college fund. During our interview, I'd mentioned it briefly as background, not realizing she would lead with it. Now it was published for anyone to see, including my parents, if they happened to come across the article. My first instinct was to call Madeline and ask for the article to be amended, but I stopped myself. Was I really still protecting them after all this time? Still hiding the truth of what they'd done? Or was I protecting myself, avoiding the confrontation that might follow? I took a deep breath and ordered the rideshare to my parents' address. It was time to stop hiding, from them or from the truth. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered. Tidy suburban homes with well-maintained lawns, a park at the end of the street where I'd learned to ride a bike, the corner store where I'd bought penny candy as a child. But as the car pulled up to my parents' driveway, I noticed changes. The maple tree in the front yard had grown significantly. The house had been repainted from blue to a trendy gray. There was an unfamiliar sedan parked in the driveway, newer and more expensive than what my parents typically drove. I thanked the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. My mother answered, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to shock as she registered who was standing on her doorstep. She looked older than I remembered, more lines around her eyes, silver threading through her dark hair. "Rebecca?" she whispered, as if saying my name too loudly might make me disappear. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I was in town and thought I'd stop by." She stared at me for another long moment before pulling me into a tight hug. "Oh my God, you're really here. Robert," she called over her shoulder. "Robert, come quick, it's Rebecca." I heard hurried footsteps, and then my father appeared in the entryway, his reading glasses perched on top of his head, a tablet in his hand. He froze when he saw me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite identify. Guilt, perhaps? "Rebecca," he said finally. "This is unexpected." "I know," I acknowledged. "I probably should have called first." "Nonsense," my mother insisted, ushering me inside. "This is still your home. You're welcome anytime." The interior of the house had changed too. New furniture, updated kitchen appliances, a large flat-screen TV mounted on the living room wall, signs of prosperity that hadn't been there when I left for college. I wondered briefly where the money had come from, but pushed the thought aside. Sit," my mother urged, gesturing toward the sofa. "Let me get you something to drink. Are you hungry? I can make lunch." "Water is fine," I said, sitting down and setting my bag beside me. "I'm not staying long. I just wanted to see you both while I was in town." "Are you here for business?" my father asked, taking a seat in the armchair across from me. "Or pleasure?" "A bit of both," I replied carefully. "I have some property in the area that I was checking on." My mother returned with a glass of water and sat beside my father, both of them looking at me expectantly. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unasked questions. "You look well," my mother finally said. "Very professional. Are you still at Northwestern?" "I just graduated," I told her. "Bachelor's in biomedical engineering. I'm starting their PhD program in the fall." "A PhD?" My father's eyebrows rose. "That's ambitious." "It's fully funded," I said, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. "Through a fellowship with Next Gen Therapeutics, they're covering tuition and providing a living stipend in exchange for my commitment to work with them after graduation." "That's wonderful," my mother said, though her smile seemed strained. "We always knew you were smart." Another awkward silence fell. I sipped my water, wondering if they would ask any substantive questions about my life, my research, my achievements, anything beyond surface observations. They didn't. "How's Vanessa?" I asked finally, deciding to shift the focus. "Mom mentioned in a text that she's engaged again." My parents exchanged a quick glance. "Yes, to a wonderful man named David," my mother said. "He's an architect. They're planning a small ceremony this time, just family and close friends at the country club." I nodded, noting the emphasis on small ceremony, as if to reassure me they wouldn't be spending another fortune on it. "That's nice. I'm happy for her." "She's living in St. Paul now," my father added, "working as an event coordinator at a hotel downtown. Finally found something that suits her social nature." "Good for her," I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish my sister ill. Her role in our family dynamics wasn't entirely her fault. Another silence descended, more uncomfortable than the last. I was about to make an excuse to leave when my father cleared his throat. "Rebecca," he began, his voice unusually hesitant. "We've been thinking about you a lot lately, especially after everything that happened with your college fund. We know we hurt you." I stared at him, surprised by the acknowledgement. It was the first time either of them had directly addressed what they'd done. "We thought you might come around eventually," my mother added. "That you'd understand once you got older that family sometimes requires sacrifices. But you just disappeared from our lives. The occasional text or call, but never really present. We've missed you." I set my water glass down carefully. "I needed to focus on building my own life," I said. "On my own terms." "And have you?" my father asked. "Built a life you're happy with?" The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. "Yes," I said after a moment. "I have. My research is going well. I've secured a patent for a prosthetic interface design that's being developed by Biomatrix Solutions. I've made some sound investments. I'm doing exactly what I set out to do." My father's expression shifted subtly. "A patent? At your age? That's quite an achievement." "It is," I agreed. "The technology has potential applications for thousands of prosthetic users. It's already generating licensing revenue." "Revenue?" My mother leaned forward slightly. "You mean you're making money from this invention?" "Yes," I said simply. "Significant money." They exchanged another glance, this one longer, and waited with something I couldn't quite interpret. "Well," my father said finally, "it seems you've done very well for yourself, despite circumstances. We're proud of you, Rebecca. Always have been." The words should have felt good to hear, but they rang hollow. Proud of me? They hadn't even known what I was doing until 5 minutes ago. They hadn't asked about my life in years, hadn't shown interest in my studies or my work. Their pride felt like an afterthought, a convenient sentiment now that I was presenting as successful. "Thank you," I said neutrally. "That means a lot." My mother fidgeted with the edge of her blouse. "You know, Rebecca, family is still important, even when we make mistakes. We hope that someday you might be ready to be more present in our lives again, especially with Vanessa's wedding coming up. She'd love to have you there." I considered my response carefully. This was the moment to either maintain the distance I'd established or begin rebuilding some kind of relationship with them. Did I want that? Did they deserve it? "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need you both to understand something. The money wasn't the real issue. It hurt, yes. It created enormous stress and hardship when I was starting college. But what hurt more was realizing where I stood in this family's priorities. That my future, my dreams, my hard work could be sacrificed without a second thought for Vanessa's temporary happiness." My father shifted uncomfortably. "That's not fair, Rebecca. We never intended." "Intentions don't matter as much as actions," I interrupted gently. "And your actions were very clear. I was the responsible one, the one who would figure it out, the one who didn't need what Vanessa needed. I spent 18 years trying to earn your attention and approval by being exactly who you wanted me to be. The good student, the reliable daughter, the one who never caused problems. And my reward was having my future treated as disposable." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We made a mistake," she whispered. "A terrible, terrible mistake. If we could go back and change it, we would." I looked at her tear-streaked face and felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also weariness. This confrontation wasn't providing the satisfaction I had imagined during those long nights studying in my tiny apartment, fueled by determination to prove them wrong. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said softly, "or to make you feel guilty. I came because I needed to see for myself whether I was still defining my life in opposition to what happened here. Whether I was still that hurt 18-year-old, inside, still trying to prove something. "And are you?" my father asked, his voice rough. I considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "I'm not. What happened was wrong, and it changed me forever. But the life I've built isn't about you anymore. It's about me, what I want, what I've created, what I value. I'm proud of myself, regardless of whether you're proud of me." The admission felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. I had come here half expecting, perhaps even hoping for, a dramatic confrontation, tears, recriminations. But sitting across from my parents now, seeing them as fallible, flawed people, rather than the architects of my suffering, I felt something unexpected: peace. "There's something else you should know," I said, reaching for my phone. "An article just published today in Biotech Innovations magazine. It features my work and it mentions what happened with my college fund." My father's face paled. "What do you mean, it mentions?" I pulled up the article and handed him my phone. It's not the focus, just context for my journey. But people might read it. Colleagues, friends, extended family. I thought you should be prepared. They bent their heads together to read, my mother's hand covering her mouth as she reached the passage about them repurposing my college fund. I watched their expressions shift from shock to dismay to something that looked like genuine shame. "This is a major publication," my father said hoarsely, handing the phone back. "People will see this." "Yes," I agreed. "Some will." "Will Vanessa see it?" my mother asked, her voice small. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I didn't write the article or approve that specific content. I mentioned it in passing during an interview about my research, not realizing the journalist would include it." My father rubbed his face with both hands. "Rebecca, this could be very embarrassing for us, for the whole family." I felt a flicker of the old anger. Even now, their primary concern was how they would be perceived, not how their actions had affected me. But the anger faded quickly, replaced by clarity. "The truth is often uncomfortable," I said calmly. "But pretending something didn't happen doesn't make it go away. It just pushes the pain underground where it festers." My mother wiped her eyes with a tissue. "You're right," she said unexpectedly. "What we did was wrong. Unconscionable, really. And we've never properly acknowledged it or made amends. We just hoped you'd forget about it eventually, that things would go back to normal. But that was selfish of us." Her admission surprised me. It was the first genuine acceptance of responsibility I'd heard from either of them. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her. "Is there?" my father began, then stopped, recalibrating. "I know money can't fix what we did, but if there's any way we could help now, with your graduate studies or anything else, we'd like to try. We've been more careful with our finances since then. Made better choices." I shook my head. "I don't need financial help. The fellowship covers everything, and the patent licensing is generating significant income. I've already paid off all my student loans from undergrad." His eyebrows rose at this. "All of them? Already?" "All of them," I confirmed. "And I've made some investments that are performing well. I own a fourplex near the U of M campus that's generating rental income. I'm financially secure." My parents exchanged another of those meaningful glances. This time I could read it clearly. Astonishment mingled with something like pride, but also unease. Their narrative about me, the daughter who needed to figure it out, was crumbling in real time. "You've accomplished all this on your own?" my mother asked softly. "Not entirely on my own," I corrected her. "I've had mentors who believed in me. Professors who championed my work. Companies that saw its value. But yes, without family support." I paused before adding, "That's the part that still hurts, you know. Not the money itself, but knowing that while I was working 3 jobs, taking out loans and trying to build a future, my own parents never once asked if I needed help. Never once checked to see if I was drowning. My father looked down at his hands. We assumed you were handling it. You always handled everything. Because I wasn't given a choice, I said quietly. From the time I was old enough to understand the dynamics in this house, I knew that being the good daughter, the responsible one, was the only way to exist here. Vanessa got to be herself, difficult, demanding, special. I got to be useful. My mother flinched as if I'd slapped her. We never meant to make you feel that way. Again, intentions matter less than impacts, I said, but gently. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because if we're ever going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on truth, not comfortable fictions. A heavy silence fell over the room. Through the window, I could see neighborhood children riding bikes on the sidewalk, their voices faint but filled with summer joy. How simple their world seemed from this distance. Where are you staying? While you're in town? My father asked finally, changing the subject. At the Hilton downtown, I replied. Just for 2 nights. I have meetings tomorrow about the property I mentioned. Then I fly to San Diego for a medical device conference. The National Medical Devices Conference? He asked, surprising me with his specificity. Yes, actually. How did you know? He gestured toward my phone. It mentioned in the article that you'll be presenting your work there. I noticed the dates. The fact that he had absorbed this detail gave me pause. Perhaps there was more genuine interest there than I had assumed. Biomatrix is showcasing the technology, I explained. I'm part of their presentation team. That's impressive, he said. And this time, the pride in his voice seemed authentic. Your mother and I never really understood the scientific path you were pursuing. Maybe we should have made more effort to learn about it. Maybe, I agreed. The acknowledgement was small but meaningful. My mother stood suddenly. Stay for lunch, she pleaded. Just a quick meal before you go. I could make those turkey sandwiches you used to like with the avocado. The invitation was so earnest, so maternal in its simplicity, that I found myself nodding. All right, lunch would be nice. As she hurried to the kitchen, visibly relieved to have a concrete task, my father leaned forward in his chair. Rebecca, he said quietly, I need to tell you something, and I'd prefer your mother not hear it just yet. We're having some financial difficulties. Nothing catastrophic, but concerning. I made some poor investment decisions, and with helping Vanessa after her divorce and now this new wedding. He trailed off, looking embarrassed. My heart sank as understanding dawned. Their renewed interest in me, was it genuine or calculated? Had news of my success triggered not parental pride but opportunistic thinking? I'm not asking for anything, he added quickly, reading my expression. I just wanted to be honest with you, since you're being honest with us. We've made mistakes, not just with your college fund, but with many financial decisions over the years. It's catching up to us now. I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation, but saw only fatigue and regret. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. I appreciate the honesty. He nodded, relief visible in the loosening of his shoulders. Your mother worries constantly about appearances. She doesn't want anyone to know we're struggling. That's why that article frightens her so much, not just because it reveals what we did to you, but because it punctures the image she's tried to maintain. This insight into my mother's psychology resonated with memories from my childhood. Her insistence on perfect holiday cards, her anxiety when the house wasn't spotless for visitors, her emphasis on how things looked rather than how they were. I understand, I said. And I did, more than he realized. The need to appear successful, to project confidence even when faltering. Hadn't I done the same during those early days at Northwestern? When I was terrified of failure but determined, no one would see my fear. She loves you, he added softly. We both do. We got it wrong, with both you girls in different ways. We indulged Vanessa when we should have set boundaries. We leaned on you when we should have supported you. And then, when the moment came to make a difficult choice, we made the wrong one. Catastrophically wrong. The admission was so stark, so unvarnished, that it momentarily took my breath away. Thank you for saying that, I managed finally. It won't fix anything, he acknowledged. But I need you to know that we see it now. What we did, who you are, what you've accomplished despite us, not because of us. From the kitchen came the sounds of lunch preparation, the refrigerator opening and closing, plates being set on the counter, my mother humming softly to herself as she assembled sandwiches. The familiar domestic soundtrack transported me, briefly back to childhood, to simpler days before resentment and betrayal had rewritten our family narrative. I don't know what a relationship between us looks like going forward, I told my father honestly. I can't just pretend the past didn't happen, but I'm open to building something new, something based on who we all are now rather than who we were then. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's more than we deserve, but we'll take it. My mother called us to the dining room, where she had set the table with a care that spoke of both anxiety and hope. The sandwiches were exactly as I remembered: turkey, avocado, a thin layer of honey mustard on sourdough bread. She had even cut them diagonally, the way I preferred as a child. As we ate, the conversation shifted to safer topics: my upcoming presentation in San Diego, my plans for graduate housing, the research focus I hoped to pursue in my doctoral studies. For the first time in my memory, my parents asked thoughtful questions about my work, making a genuine effort to understand concepts unfamiliar to them. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, moments when the weight of our shared history pressed into the room like an unwelcome guest. But it was a beginning, tentative, fragile, but real. When lunch was finished, I checked my watch and announced that I needed to leave for my afternoon meeting. My mother hugged me tightly at the door, whispering, "I'm so sorry," into my ear. My father shook my hand, then pulled me into an awkward embrace. "We're proud of you," he said again, but this time the words had substance behind them. Truly proud. You've become an extraordinary young woman, Rebecca. As my rideshare pulled away from the curb, I watched my parents standing in the doorway, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen them. The anger that had fueled me for so long had faded to a dull ache, a phantom limb of emotion. In its place was something new and unexpected: compassion. Not forgiveness exactly. The wound was too deep for such a simple resolution. But understanding. They were flawed people who had made a terrible choice. Their mistake had altered the course of my life, but the direction it had taken me wasn't one I regretted. As we turned the corner, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Carter. "How did it go? Are you okay?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Not fixed, but clearer. I'll call you later." Then I put my phone away and watched the familiar streets of my childhood pass by the window. I had come here seeking closure, perhaps even vindication. What I found instead was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I wasn't defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had created in its absence. The hurt would always be there, a scar on the landscape of our family history. But scars also marked survival, resilience, healing. As the Minneapolis skyline came into view, I realized something profound. I was free. Not from the past, but from its power to determine my future. The next chapter would be written on my terms, not in reaction to their betrayal, but in service to my own vision. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The National Medical Devices Conference in San Diego was larger than I had anticipated. Thousands of industry professionals gathered in a sprawling convention center overlooking the Pacific. Biomatrix had secured a prime location for our display, situated near the main entrance where foot traffic was heaviest. The sleek booth featured a video demonstration of my prosthetic interface technology and several working prototypes that attendees could examine. I stood beside Dr. Lin as he guided a group of potential investors through the technical specifications, trying to appear confident despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. This was my first major industry conference, and the stakes felt impossibly high, not just for Biomatrix, but for my own career trajectory. "And this is Rebecca Turner, the primary inventor," Dr. Lin said, gesturing toward me. She developed the initial concept while still an undergraduate at Northwestern. The investors, 3 middle-aged men in expensive suits, regarded me with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. I was used to this reaction. Being young and female in the biomedical engineering field often meant having to prove myself repeatedly. "An undergraduate?" one of them echoed. "Impressive. What inspired the design?" I launched into my well-rehearsed explanation about the limitations of current prosthetic interfaces, the neuromuscular challenges, the gap between mechanical functionality and intuitive control. As I spoke, I could see their skepticism yielding to genuine interest. "The key innovation," I concluded, "is this adaptive neural mapping system that learns from the user's movement patterns. It creates a more intuitive connection between thought and action, reducing the cognitive load required to operate the prosthetic." One of the men, the oldest of the group, with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, stepped forward to examine the prototype more closely. "My son lost his arm in Afghanistan," he said quietly. "The prosthetic he has now. It's functional, but he says it always feels foreign, like a tool, not a part of him." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. That's precisely the problem we're addressing. The goal isn't just functionality, but integration, creating a prosthetic that feels like an extension of self rather than an external device. He looked up at me, something shifting in his expression. "How far are you from clinical trials?" "We've completed initial safety testing," Dr. Lin interjected. "Human trials are scheduled to begin next quarter, pending final FDA approval." The conversation continued, diving deeper into timelines, funding requirements, and market potential. By the time the investors moved on to the next booth, Dr. Lin was beaming. "They're interested," he whispered. "Very interested. Especially Walter Kincaid. He's the one whose son lost an arm. He's not just an investor. He's chairman of Allied Medical Partners. Their backing could accelerate our timeline significantly." The rest of the day passed in a blur of presentations, demonstrations, and networking. By evening, my voice was hoarse from explaining the technology to an endless stream of curious attendees. When Dr. Lin suggested we celebrate with dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the harbor, I gratefully accepted. The restaurant was the kind of place I would never have imagined dining at during my early college years. White tablecloths, crystal stemware, a wine list thicker than some of my textbooks. Dr. Lin ordered a bottle of champagne, insisting that today's success warranted it. "To breakthrough technology," he said, raising his glass, "and to the brilliant mind behind it." I smiled, clinking my glass against his. "And to Biomatrix for taking a chance on an undergraduate's concept." He shook his head. "It wasn't a chance, Rebecca. It was a calculated investment in exceptional talent. The company recognized what your professors already knew. You think differently. You see connections others miss." His praise warmed me more than the champagne. Unlike my parents' belated acknowledgement of my achievements, Dr. Lin's recognition felt genuine because it had been consistent from the beginning. He had seen potential in my ideas when they were still rough sketches and mathematical speculations. As we enjoyed our meal, Dr. Lin shared news that he had been saving for this moment. Biomatrix was planning to establish a new research division focused specifically on neural integration technologies, and they wanted me to lead it after completing my doctorate. The board approved it yesterday, he explained. Full research autonomy, a dedicated team, and a compensation package that reflects the value we place on your contributions. All contingent on your agreement, of course. I nearly choked on my risotto. Lead a division? But I haven't even started my PhD program yet. Which gives us 3 to 4 years to build the infrastructure while you complete your studies, he replied smoothly. The timeline aligns perfectly, and your work with NextGen during your fellowship will only enhance your qualifications. The offer was extraordinary, a clear leadership path in exactly the field I was passionate about, with resources to pursue the research directions I found most promising. It was more than I had dared to imagine at this stage of my career. I'm honored, I said sincerely, and definitely interested. But I'd like some time to consider it, if that's all right. This would be a significant commitment. Dr. Lin nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. The opportunity isn't going anywhere. He smiled. Neither is your potential. Back in my hotel room that night, I found myself too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion of the day. I stood by the window, gazing out at the San Diego skyline glittering against the dark ocean beyond. 5 years ago, I had been a betrayed, 18-year-old, furious at my parents and terrified about my future. Now I was fielding job offers to lead research divisions, with a patent to my name and financial security that exceeded my wildest expectations. The contrast was so stark, it almost felt unreal, like I was observing someone else's life rather than my own. Had I really come so far in such a relatively short time? Or was this all more fragile than it appeared? A house of cards that could collapse with one wrong move. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Dr. Carter. Saw the biotech innovations. Article. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. How did the first day of the conference go? I smiled, typing back, better than expected, important connections made, possible investment interest, also job offer to lead a new division at Biomatrix after graduation. Her response came quickly. Call me tomorrow with details. Now go celebrate. You've earned it. I set the phone down, her words echoing in my mind. You've earned it. Not luck, not handouts, not someone else's generosity, but my own hard work and innovation. Everything I had now, I had built myself, brick by determined brick. The realization brought with it a profound sense of peace. Whatever came next, whether I accepted Biomatrix's offer or pursued other opportunities, the foundation beneath me was solid, mine. The next morning, I was preparing for the day's presentations when my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize with a Minneapolis area code. Curious, I answered. Rebecca Turner speaking. Rebecca, it's David Maxwell, Vanessa's fiancé. The voice was hesitant, unfamiliar. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Your mother gave me your number. I frowned, confused as to why my sister's fiancé would be contacting me. We had never met, and I hadn't spoken to Vanessa in years. Yes, it's fine. What can I do for you, David? There was a pause, then... I saw the article in Biotech Innovations. About your work and what happened with your college fund. I didn't know. Vanessa never mentioned it. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, suddenly alert. I see. And you're calling because... Because I'm having second thoughts about the wedding, he said bluntly. Not just because of this, to be clear. There have been other concerns. But learning that your parents took your college. Money for Vanessa's first wedding. A marriage that barely lasted a year. It raises questions about the family I'm marrying into. About patterns that might repeat. I closed my eyes, processing his words. This was exactly the kind of fallout I had momentarily feared when I saw the article. Family dynamics exposed to public view, judgments being formed based on a single paragraph about a complex situation. "David," I began carefully, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not comfortable discussing my family's financial decisions with someone I've never met. Whatever happened between my parents, my sister, and me is our business." "I understand," he said quickly, "and I apologize if this seems intrusive. But Vanessa and I are about to blend our finances, our lives. She's been pushing for me to contribute significantly to this wedding, even though I've suggested something smaller. Her spending habits are concerning, and your parents have already offered to help in ways that feel inappropriate given our ages and incomes." The parallels were unmistakable, and a chill ran through me. History preparing to repeat itself, with different players but the same script. "What are you asking from me?" I questioned directly. He sighed. "Honestly? Perspective, I guess. You're the only person who might understand my concerns without being emotionally invested in this wedding happening exactly as Vanessa envisions it." It was a bizarre position to find myself in, offering relationship advice to my estranged sister's fiancé based on my own painful family history. But there was something about his sincerity that resonated with me. "I can't tell you what to do about your relationship," I said finally. "But I can tell you this. Patterns don't break unless someone actively breaks them. In my family, there was a pattern of prioritizing my sister's wants over my needs. I broke that pattern by removing myself from the equation, by building my own life on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "And you don't regret it?" he asked, "distancing yourself from them?" I considered his question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. But no, I don't regret the choices I've made since then. They led me to where I am now, and I'm proud of that place." There was silence on the line as he absorbed my words. Then, "Thank you for being honest with me. I have some thinking to do." After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, unsettled by the conversation. What would happen between David and Vanessa wasn't my concern, I reminded myself. Their relationship, their choices, these were entirely separate from my life now. Yet I couldn't help wondering if the article might ripple through my family in other unexpected ways. Would extended relatives read it? Friends? Neighbors? Would my parents face uncomfortable questions about decisions they had made years ago? I pushed these thoughts aside as I headed downstairs for the day's conference sessions. Whatever consequences emerged from the truth being published, they weren't my responsibility to manage. I had my own future to focus on, a future brimming with possibilities that had been hard-earned and well-deserved. The second day of the conference was even more successful than the first. Walter Kincaid, the investor whose son had lost an arm, sought me out specifically to discuss potential applications of my technology for veterans. By the afternoon, Biomatrix had secured preliminary commitments for substantial new funding specifically, earmarked for accelerating the development of my interface design. As I was packing up our display materials at the end of the day, Dr. Lin approached with a tall, distinguished-looking woman in a crisp navy suit. "Rebecca, I'd like you to meet Dr. Eleanor Harrington, Dean of Biomedical Engineering at Johns Hopkins," he said. "She's very interested in your work." I shook her hand, surprised and a little awed. Johns Hopkins had one of the most prestigious biomedical engineering programs in the country. "Dr. Turner," she said warmly, "your neural mapping algorithm is fascinating. I've been following its development since the initial patent was filed. Have you considered the applications for stroke rehabilitation?" "Actually, yes," I replied, quickly regaining my composure. "The same principles that allow for intuitive control of prosthetics could potentially help restore neural pathways damaged by stroke. I've been working on theoretical models, but they're still preliminary." What followed was an intense 20-minute discussion about neural plasticity, therapeutic applications, and research methodologies. Dr. Harrington asked probing questions. that pushed me to articulate aspects of my theory I had previously left underdeveloped. It was exhilarating to engage with someone who not only understood the technical complexities, but could envision the broader implications. "I'm giving a keynote address tomorrow on emerging neural interface technologies," she said, as our conversation wound down. "I'd like to include your work as a case study, if you're comfortable with that." "I'd be honored," I replied sincerely. She handed me her card. "Excellent. And when you're further along in your doctoral studies, keep Johns Hopkins in mind. We're always looking for innovative researchers who can bridge the gap between theoretical models and practical applications." After she left, Dr. Lin grinned at me. "You've made quite an impression. Eleanor Harrington doesn't praise easily." I tucked her card carefully into my wallet, still processing what had just occurred. "It's a bit overwhelming," I admitted. "Yesterday, Biomatrix offers me a division leadership role. Today, Johns Hopkins expresses interest. 4 years ago, I was working 3 jobs just to stay afloat." His expression softened. "Success compounds, Rebecca. Each achievement opens doors to new opportunities, new connections. The hardest step is the first one, proving yourself when no one else believes in your potential. You've cleared that hurdle decisively." That evening, I decided to celebrate by treating myself to dinner at a small seafood restaurant near the beach. As I enjoyed grilled mahi-mahi and watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I hesitated before answering, still processing our recent reunion and unsure what more there was to say, but curiosity won out. "Hello?" "Rebecca," he said, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. "We need to talk. Are you somewhere private?" "I'm at a restaurant," I replied, immediately concerned. "Is something wrong? Is Mom okay?" "Your mother's fine," he assured me quickly. "But something's happened. David, Vanessa's fiancé, has called off the engagement." I set down my fork, a cold sensation spreading through my chest. "I see. And this concerns me because..." There was a pause then. "Because he cited that article about you as the reason. Said it made him question Vanessa's character and our family values. Your sister is devastated. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since we got the news." The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had done nothing wrong. "I'm sorry to hear about Vanessa's engagement," I said carefully. "But I had nothing to do with that article mentioning our family history. I simply answered questions about my professional journey." "But you could have kept that part private," he argued. "You could have declined to discuss family matters with a journalist. The way you all kept it private when you took my college." "Fund?" I countered, keeping my voice level despite the surge of old anger. "Dad, I didn't seek out publicity for what happened, but I'm also not going to lie or hide the truth to protect people who didn't protect me." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its accusatory edge. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just... the house is chaos right now. Vanessa's inconsolable, blaming everyone but herself. Your mother feels guilty. I feel guilty. It's bringing everything back up to the surface." I gazed out at the darkening ocean, feeling a strange detachment from the drama unfolding hundreds of miles away. I understand this is difficult for everyone, but David made his own decision based on information that was truthful. If that truth reflected poorly on our family dynamics, that's not my responsibility to fix. "I know," he sighed. "I know that, logically, it's just messy." "Life often is," I replied, softening slightly. For what it's worth, I think David was having doubts before he saw that article. He called me this morning, asking for perspective. He mentioned concerns about Vanessa's spending habits and the pressure to have an elaborate wedding. "He called you?" My father sounded shocked. Why would he reach out to someone he's never met? because I was the only person in the family who might understand his concerns without a vested interest in the wedding proceeding, I explained. I didn't encourage him to call off the engagement, if that's what you're asking. I simply shared my experience about recognizing unhealthy patterns. My father was quiet again, processing this information. I see, he said finally. I should have known you wouldn't interfere that way. Another pause. Rebecca, I've been thinking a lot since your visit, about the patterns in our family, as you put it, about how we treated you compared to Vanessa. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. The admission, coming without prompting or defensive qualifications, caught me off guard. No, I agreed softly. It wasn't. After you left, I found some of your old school awards in the attic, he continued. Perfect attendance certificates, science fair ribbons, honor roll reports. So many achievements that we barely acknowledged at the time because we were busy managing Vanessa's latest crisis or celebrating her smallest accomplishments. We took you for granted in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. I closed my eyes, unprepared for the sudden sting of tears. These were the words I had longed to hear for years. Acknowledgement not just of the college fund betrayal, but of the entire pattern that had shaped my childhood and adolescence. I wish I could undo it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I wish I could go back and be the father you deserved. But I can't change the past. All I can do is apologize and try to do better moving forward. I took a steadying breath. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I saw more of that article today, he added. Read it properly instead of just fixating on the part about the college fund. Your work. It's remarkable. Rebecca. I didn't understand half the technical terms, but I understood enough to be amazed. You're helping people regain function, dignity, independence. That's extraordinary. His genuine admiration, free from the awkwardness of our face-to-face union, touched something deep inside me. Thank you, Dad. Your mother and I were wondering, he continued hesitantly, if we might come to your graduation ceremony when you complete your PhD. Not to intrude on your life or take credit for your accomplishments. Just to be there, to support you the way we should have all along. The invitation was so unexpected that it left me momentarily speechless. My doctoral graduation was years away, but the fact that they were thinking that far ahead, wanting to be part of a significant milestone in my life, felt like a tentative bridge being extended across the chasm between us. I'd like that, I said finally. It's a long way off, but yes, I'd appreciate having you there. We talked for a few more minutes, his tone notably different from the accusatory one at the beginning of the call. Before we hung up, he mentioned something that made me pause. By the way, I've started reading about prosthetic technologies, he said, a hint of shyness in his voice. Trying to understand your work better. It's challenging for someone without a scientific background, but I'm learning. Your mother has been reading too. We want to be able to have real conversations with you about your research, not just superficial chit-chat. It was such a small thing, parents educating themselves about their child's interests, but it represented a seismic shift in our relationship. They were making an effort not just to acknowledge my achievements, but to understand them, to engage with the aspects of my life that mattered most to me. I appreciate that, I told him sincerely. Next time we talk, I'd be happy to explain the basics in simpler terms. I'd like that, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. After we hung up, I remained at my table long after my plate had been cleared, watching the moonlight dance across the waves. The conversation with my father had left me in a contemplative mood, reflecting on the strange, circular journey that had brought me to this moment. The college fund betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had instead been the catalyst for everything that followed. The determination to succeed independently, the focus on innovation rather than security, the freedom to build A life defined by my own values rather than my family's expectations. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was grateful for what they had done. The hurt was still real, the trust still damaged. But I could acknowledge that sometimes our lowest moments become the foundation for our greatest strengths. The very absence of support had forced me to discover resources within myself I might never have accessed otherwise. As I walked back to my hotel along the beach, my phone buzzed with a text from Walter Kincaid. After further discussion with my partners, we would like to substantially increase our investment in your technology. My son would like to meet you tomorrow if possible. Your work gives him hope. I stopped walking, reading the message twice to make sure I had understood it correctly. This wasn't just funding for research, it was validation of its purpose, its potential to transform lives. I typed back a quick confirmation, adding that it would be an honor to meet his son. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to review my presentation for the next day. As the screen lit up, I noticed an email notification from Madeline Chen, the journalist who had written the Biotech Innovations article. Rebecca, I wanted to reach out directly to thank you for sharing your story with me. Since the article was published, I've received numerous messages from young scientists and engineers who found your journey inspiring, particularly women facing their own obstacles in male-dominated fields. Your willingness to discuss both the professional and personal challenges you've overcome has resonated deeply with readers. If you're open to it, I'd love to do a more in-depth feature on your research for our special innovation issue in September. I sat back in my chair, surprised by the impact my story had apparently had beyond my own family circle. The idea that my experiences could inspire others, could perhaps help someone else navigate their own difficult path, was both humbling and empowering. As I considered Madeline's request, my gaze fell on the conference badge lying on the desk. Printed with my name and credentials, Dr. Rebecca Turner, PhD candidate, Biomedical Engineering, Northwestern University. Presented alongside the Biomatrix Solutions logo, it looked impressive, authoritative, the badge of someone who belonged in this world of innovation and discovery. 5 years ago, standing in my parents' kitchen with my Northwestern acceptance letter crumpled in my hand, I could never have imagined this future. The betrayal had felt like the end of my dreams, not the beginning of a journey that would lead to patents, publications, and professional recognition. What would happen next? Would I accept the leadership position at Biomatrix? Explore opportunities at Johns Hopkins? Found my own company someday? The possibilities seemed limitless now, unconstrained by the expectations or limitations others had once placed upon me. And what of my family? Was reconciliation possible, or would we settle for a polite detente, occasional contact without true closeness? I wasn't sure, but my father's call suggested healing might be possible, even if the relationship would never be what it once was, or perhaps what it never truly had been. 5 years had transformed a devastated 18-year-old into a confident, accomplished young woman with a future limited only by her own ambitions. What might the next 5 years bring? As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from Dr. Carter. Whatever happens next, remember this. Your worth was never determined by what they took from you, but by what you built in its place. I smiled, setting the phone on the nightstand. She was right, as always. What had begun as a story of betrayal had become something else entirely. A testament to resilience, to the power of determined self-creation. My parents had sold my college fund for my sister's wedding, but in doing so, they had unwittingly set me on a path to building something far more valuable than money. A life designed entirely on my own terms. A future limited only by my own vision, and a sense of self-worth that could never be taken away. When they saw my net worth 5 years later, they had indeed cried. But the true wealth I had accumulated wasn't measured in dollars. It was calculated in resilience, in innovation, in the capacity to transform adversity into achievement. That was the balance sheet that truly mattered. And on that, I was rich beyond measure. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.